Why don't you take a seat and tell me what appears to be the problem? Consult the doctor. Let's have a look at some questions. I received 3 very pragmatic questions and one question that I think may involve a little bit more talking. Let's start off with a simple one. Simple but not easy, as they say. What in your mind is the best modern flex nib? Aurora, Mont Blanc, Scribo, Leonardo, Armando Simoni Club, etc. I don't think there is a single modern manufacturer of flex nibs that creates nibs that perform as well as vintage flex nibs. Think of the traditional flex nibs that have nice ebonite feeds, that have a really nice amount of line variation that simply does not exist in modern pens in my mind. Very often you run into problems of railroading. In other words, a nib does not actually keep up. I should say the feed does not really keep up with the demand placed on the nib as you write. So in other words, instead of getting a nice wide line, you get 2 thin lines as the tines. It sounds like a Dr. Seuss story, man. Okay, you get 2 thin lines when the tines spread out and the feed cannot keep up with the ink demand, instead of 1 wide line. And that's a problem. And I don't see any manufacturer who's really resolved that. I was quite impressed with the Mont Blanc Flex nib. I don't own any Mont Blancs, so I'm not trying to push an expensive nib on you, but I found it really quite nice. In the much more affordable range, I have found a lot of the Fountain Pen Revolution flex nibs quite good. I also have read comments from people who said, yeah, mine was terrible. Yeah, I guess there's always going to be variation. Again, that's part of the problem. They simply don't always work. I'm not talking about Fountain Pen Revolution in particular. In general, there's just a lot of variation. I have a Armando Simoni Club nib on my Bologna Extra in the brown Arco. You can check out my review or my personal pens video on that if you want to see it in action. I find that a very pleasant nib. It's a number 8 nib. It doesn't have a particularly deep slit. I would call it more of a semi-flex nib, but it has a 2-part feed where part of the feed actually can lift up a bit to stop or at least minimize that railroading issue. And I have found that nib to work well. I haven't found it to railroad a lot, but the problem with that is that I think it's a solid semi-flex nib. I shouldn't say that, should I? I find that a well-performing semi-flex nib, but people expect a full flex nib, push it way too hard, and then you still get issues. If you're able to accept that you'll get a bit of line variation out of that and a pretty good ink flow, I think you may really enjoy that nib. Having said that, the Magic Flex nib by Armando Simoni Club, again, it is not an inexpensive option. So yeah, I don't remember if I've used the Aurora Flex nib. I know it exists. At this point, you have to forgive me. I have reviewed so many pens and I'm an old man, so I forget what I have used and have not used. I have heard very good things about that nib if I have not used it. The Scribo Flex nibs are certainly very nice. My issue with Scribo is those nibs are exceptionally soft. And as a result, they spring, in other words, open up but don't snap back very easily. You have to be very, very careful with the Extra Flessibile nibs by Scribo. That's pretty much all I have. I've also reviewed Leonardo. I mean, I can go over every single flex nib I've ever reviewed. I know how useful it is. Leonardo nibs worked pretty well. So, I mean, there are options. I'm not trying to dodge the question, but I think all these nibs have pros and cons. The Mont Blanc nib is nice, but it was also relatively scratchy, and it is not a mega flexy nib. So again, there's no winners here. There's only compromises, just like in life. Okay. Let's continue with, I'm sorry, it's been a long day, with the next question. What to be careful of in ultrasonic cleaners. Ultrasonic cleaners can be a great tool. They are ultrasonic. You put water in them, you put pen parts in them, and then the ultrasonic vibrations will get rid of ink bits left in the pen. I found that particularly helpful on feeds. If you can pull an entire nib and feed out. You can put the feed in there. You'll be surprised at how much ink comes out, especially if you don't clean your pens very often. Having said that, there are certain concerns. One of the concerns that I see online quite a bit is from people who have had plated pens, so gold-plated, silver-plated, rhodium-plated, doesn't matter, but some sort of plating on pens that has come off in an ultrasonic cleaner. I think I've experienced it once, and that was on a very cheap pen. I guess it depends on the quality of the plating work. I'm certainly not a metallurgist, so I really don't want to speak to that, but I think that matters because that was a very cheap pen. So my recommend, by the way, the great Brian Anderson, if anyone has repaired a lot of pens, it's Brian, he knows what he's talking about. He said it's typically not an issue unless there already is damage. Then that stuff can flake off more. Maybe don't quote me on that, but he said that at some point. So that is something to take into consideration. Final thing I will say on that is, I think the safest thing that you can do when you want to put something in ultrasonic cleaner is put as little of the pen in the ultrasonic cleaner. For example, if you have a piston-filled pen, this is not one, but if you put the whole thing in, maybe because of those vibrations you could get water behind the piston seal, where it may be hard to clean that out or get it out. You can get leakage from behind. None of it is very pleasant. So maybe be a little careful in what you do there. For me, at most I put in a section, and that's in cartridge converter filled pens. Ideally I pull the nib and feed or screw them out, whatever is required, and put those in. That's my preference. Just the nib, just the feed. Sometimes nib feed in a nib collar, but that's it. Sections, sometimes if something is piston filled and I can't take the nib and feed out, I tend not to put them in an ultrasonic cleaner, because then I'm submerging a lot of the pen in there, and I'm trying to avoid that. That's just me. I certainly, yeah, I mean, don't take my word for it. That's my strategy. Again, other people may do different things. I will say I've only had that flaking issue once. So it works for me. I'm not sure if I've answered this question before, but I feel that I may have, but then I forgot to check, so I'm going to go over it. Good websites to sell pens other than eBay. Well, eBay. But you asked other websites. There are other websites, but I would go to dedicated sites then. Of course, there are auction sites, but then those auction sites will take a commission. Maybe go for something like Fountain Pen Network, Fountain Pen Geeks, those kinds of forums dedicated to pens. That might be useful because you have a very dedicated audience there that is looking for pens to buy. That's really all I have, because beyond that, I mean, oh, and by the way, there are good buy and sell groups, fountain pen buy and sell groups on Facebook, so that's also something to check out. Having said that, when you're selling something online, you always have to be careful. There are many stories you can find easily. People who are trying to sell pens online who got ripped off, who send out the pen but never got any payment. My strategy is simple. You get the pen when I have the payment. And sometimes it's a matter of trust, where people promise to send things out at the same time. But again, that goes wrong. It's very harsh. I don't mean to rip anyone off, but you'll get your pen when I have my payment. Then again, I'm also kind of a public figure in the fountain pen sphere. So if you don't get your pen, you know where to find me and you know where to complain about me, right? So for me, that's another thing of, I have my money and you get your pen, and that's how it works. And if I screw up, you don't get your pen, well, then you have 1,000 fountain pen forums where you can complain about me again. Right? Like that's kind of the thing. But if that works differently for you, all I'm saying is be a little careful. You don't know exactly who you're dealing with online. I've always had very good experiences and very gracious experiences. Even the very rare occasion that something has gone lost in the mail, which really hasn't happened a lot. I mean, I can remember maybe 1 or 2 times in dozens and dozens of pen sales. People were good, and I mean, then do the right thing. Then they get their money back, and you're out of a pen and out of your money. But this is the risk, right? Which is, I guess, my final point. For the love of God, send things with insurance. especially in expensive pens. Don't try to save a buck not getting the insurance, because yes, 9 out of 10 times you won't need it and you may have paid the additional dollars, but the one time you do, you'll be very grateful that you had that covered for a $700,000, $2,000 pen. Just saying. Okay, the final question I had was I said it wasn't going to be very long because they're all simple questions, already 10 minutes in. Conciseness is my strong suit, isn't it? Can you recommend any good books? And the specific question dealt with like information on like technical stuff and how nibs write, etc. There are very good books that I have just beyond arm's length, and I could have arm's reach. Sorry, I could have pulled them out, but I didn't. The books by Andreas Lambrou, Lambrou. These are very good books that I would certainly try to pick up pre-owned or maybe from a fountain pen store for various reasons. But having said that, then sometimes you can get a good deal. They're expensive books, but a lot of fountain pen stores sell them a little bit under the MSRP. Maybe I shouldn't say a lot. I have seen fountain pen stores that sell those books a little under the MSRP. If you can get a pre-owned copy, they're always worth it. Those books are a treasure trove of information, but they really are focused on collecting. So here are all the Montegrappa pens made between this year and that year, with wonderful pictures, beautiful illustrations, and that's also why they're so expensive. But those are truly magnificent books. They're large format. I have not really a review, but an overview video where, what was that site called? Massdrop, I think, sent those books to me, and I kind of went over what I liked about them. Beautiful, but pricey. A very good option that I cannot recommend enough is Peter Twidle's book, Fountain Pens. Simple book, not huge, like maybe this thick, nice little hardback, and it's in a series on collect books on different things you can collect, and this one's fountain pens. Peter Twidle was the son of the late, great Arthur Twidle, who was a famous fountain pen repairman, who I guess I should say pen repairman because he also repaired ballpoints and mechanical pencils, if I remember correctly. So writing equipment repairman who also had a fountain pen store, or I should say writing equipment store. And Peter Twidle also does, so the son also does repairs, or at least used to do repairs. And he wrote this book called Fountain Pens, and it's a beautiful book, well illustrated, glossy paper. It looks really nice, but it also has outstanding information, which I think is the type of information you were looking for, which is stuff like, how does a fountain pen work? How does ink flow from the ink reservoir to the nib? What actually is a fountain pen? How do you define that? And it is really good pragmatic information on different filling systems, how they work, how you use them. Very, very nice book, especially for the price. It's not even that expensive, and it is a treasure trove of information. It also has a section, which is probably about half the book or so, about the most collectible pen models from different brands. So if you want to collect Conklin, these are the models you should look out for, and this is what you could maybe pay for them, but that kind of stuff with nice pictures. I found that to be an outstanding resource that I was very fortunate to discover early on in my fountain pen journey, because I learned a lot from that book. So if you want that, not just a coffee table book with pretty pictures, of which there are many, the Lambrou books are certainly those kinds of books, but if you want really pragmatic information on the use of fountain pens, then I would certainly say that book by Peter Twidle is a very good option. And I hope that answers your question. I would certainly recommend that. It's also still in print, so it shouldn't be too difficult to find that or order it through your favorite bookstore. Okay, I hope this was useful. If you have any questions, by all means, leave them below in the comments and I will get to them. It may take a little bit of time, but I will get to your question, and I very much appreciate it because it allows me the continuation of these videos. I hope this was useful, and I will gladly see you later. Bye-bye.